we have obviously some very dramatic and important advances, but I can't let this panel not address the issue of cost effectiveness because these are dramatic therapies, but with a big price tag. So how do we, and I have my own thoughts about this, but I want to hear it from others, how do we start to address this issue of cost effectiveness? Because at the end of the day, we have to have a healthcare system that not only provides advances, but is sustainable.
Well, I think we talked about this before, comparative studies of different agents allowing us to move these earlier into therapy where they won't get a whole series of very expensive drugs, potential replacement of transplantation. There are a whole series of things that I think can make these cost effective, but probably the most important thing that's going to make this cost effective is having a lot of things on the market.
This is a hot topic, obviously, and none of us are experts on this, but obviously I think the whole system is broken in how we do this, and it's very challenging. I think it's important to remember that the cost of the drug is only one part of it. The supportive care or the actual delivery of the care is probably equally expensive in many situations. And also we need to remember that it's not just the cost of the drug, it's the cost of all the other drugs patients are getting in their course of their disease. And often those are chronic drugs that they're on year after year after year for many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so all this needs to be taken into context rather than just reacting to cost. Ultimately, it will come down to effectiveness, toxicity, and probably cost. And competition will be a good thing, and I think in that area.
I agree. I'm going to throw in some things because I've been leading the ASBMT this year. I've been working on a lot of healthcare finance issues, and one of the things I would say first, we have to look at these therapies in lieu of the other therapies that might be used. I do think that we have to not only look at the cost to the healthcare system and in terms of the entire range of care costs, but also the impact on the patient. I think we can't just think about that out-of-pocket costs and how that this affects the patient's financial burden is important. There are measures like quality adjusted life years and the dollars, but I think that we have to be a little bit careful because you can come up with a number that might seem like, okay, this is justifiable, but at the end of the day, it has to be one that public and private payers can absorb, and that doesn't lead to preferential access. I think none of us wants to see great advances, and we have only a subset of patients that has the right kind of insurance. So I think that it is important for us, even though we can't answer these questions, that those of us who are experts in this area work with payers, work with the public, work with the manufacturers to make sure that we have models that are sustainable.
Yes, absolutely.
To do this in a fair way.
Agree.
So this has been a great discussion, and I think we've covered a really broad range of topics. And I want to really, I know we're a talkative group, but I want to each give you your opportunities to summarize your thoughts about where we are and where we may be going. And we'll start with David.
Yeah, I just think this is an absolutely exciting time for the development of new therapies for cancer. I've been involved in antibodies for many, many years in development, and this is really making an antibody really work well. And so CAR T cells have the most anti-tumor activity I've ever seen in my career, and it's tremendously gratifying to see it going forward. We do need to solve toxicity. We need to figure out how to prevent or head off CRS, and especially we need to work on neurotox. And I think if we can get those things under control, this will be more widely acceptable. Obviously, for this to succeed, the companies that are involved need to be reliable. They need to be able to make product. They need to make that product 100% of the time, and they need to make it available in a timely fashion, whether that be 2 weeks or 4 weeks, but it needs to be timely. And if we can do this, then we can get these new drugs incorporated into the treatment paradigms or the clinical care pathways and save patients' lives.
Steve?
Yeah, I can only echo what David said. I mean, I remember not so long ago, well, maybe long, but it doesn't seem long ago to me, that people would argue whether T cells could even, cure cancer or treat cancer or have anti-tumor efficacy. And there, of course, there was the DLI data, and CML was the first inkling that, that this whole theory of immune surveillance and anti-tumor immunity might really be clinically relevant. Well, I could say anybody that has doubt about whether T cells can treat cancer, they need to treat somebody with CAR T cells because T cells can definitely successfully treat cancer in the right situation. So I think it is an exciting time. We have a new approach, a new paradigm. We talked about a couple of targets, but you just need to, and we've talked about even, using modifications of T cells to make them more universal. And there's so many things that are possible now because of the technologies that we have that I think the future is bright and the times are quite exciting. This is probably the best time in my career.
Well, I want to say first, it's been a privilege. You guys have all contributed dramatically to the literature in this area and the clinical advances. I'll just say the anecdote that when I went to UC San Francisco as a fellow and I wanted to go into a research laboratory, there were actually no cancer immunology laboratories at UCSF, and I ended up doing HIV immunology, which was good for me at that time, but it is great for me as a hematologist and as a T-cell immunologist to see the era where all of a sudden, we're seeing these dramatic advances in the hands of clinicians and affecting patients. So it's been a pleasure. So I'm really excited about where we are. And Michael, you'll get the last word.
I think that I couldn't agree more with everyone. This is very exciting times where we are doing not baby steps, we are doing giant leaps in being able to take care of the sickest patients. My goal, I'm a transplanter. I think that most of the people here on this are transplanters. My goal would be to eliminate transplant, to understand CARs well enough that we know when to turn them on and turn them off, and to get toxicity under control.
That's great. So I want to thank you all for your contributions again to this discussion. And on behalf of our panel, we thank you for joining us, and we hope you found this peer exchange discussion to be both useful and informative. Thank you.